The city of Spokane, first B-52 to be assigned to the 92nd Bomb Wing at Fairchild Air Force Base. Since it began flying missions in 1957, the ground and flight crews of this Stratofortress have built a record that stands as a mark to be bettered by any other single plane in the Air Force. Thanks primarily to first-rate maintenance on the part of ground crewmen and precision teamwork by the flight crew, this B-52 has flown 50 straight missions with no late takeoffs, no aborts, no cancellations. Chalk this up as a record to be beaten. Congratulations to the men who maintain and fly the city of Spokane.
Initially active during the early 50s, the B-52 served as the Strategic Air Command's chief tool of intimidation. Its endurance permitted global stationing of SAC's atomic weaponry. Currently, the B-52 is utilized in low-altitude strike and electronic combat missions. When it debuted back in 1955, the B-52 represented the peak of jet strike engineering, yet its origins are linked to a choice made by the Department of Defense 10 years prior, while the country was fighting. Across much of World War II, America remained dedicated to the advancement of established systems, since this allowed manufacturing plants to produce the gear of combat with the pressure required. Reciprocating motors were vastly refined. The piston engine unit powered every American plane that fought in the brutal aerial clashes of World War II. Even the heavy Boeing B-29, which boasted more pace, distance, and capacity than any other Striker, still relied upon radial engine engineering. The B-29 was considered to be the zenith of flight, but actually, its high technical benchmark was quickly made outdated by a fresh class of planes. Early in the conflict, it arrived as a total surprise for the United States to find that Germany and Britain had created gas turbine jet motors that would soon be capable of pushing fighters at rates much quicker than the legendary Stratofortress. In 1944, the American Army Air Force declared a necessity for an all-jet Striker fast enough to bypass jet interceptors. Orders were signed for at least 5 unique concepts. But it required another technical wonder, atomic splitting, to bring the fight to a fast and shocking finish. Although a B-29 was used to transport the device, just one plane released one charge, and in moments, the center of Hiroshima failed to remain. If one plane could transport such a ruinous cargo, then maybe vast wings of bombers would no longer be essential to win a contemporary war. The terrible price in souls that America had spent to secure island B-29 hubs in the Pacific had shifted the requirements for the coming era of Strikers. During the initial post-war years, doctrine focused on the capacity to transport the nuclear charge over extremely long gaps, and the Air Force placed its focus on long-range transcontinental planes, a duty that the Convair B-36 Peacemaker sufficiently met for a period. The massive B-36 was truly a Second World War concept that reached too late for battle. It needed no fewer than 6 heavy piston motors to drive it at what were moderate rates. However, jet turbines were later mounted in pods beneath the wing to boost its thrust. By 1947, the jet strike program was beginning to reach its completion. In that period, 5 entries were evaluated, though by then they were categorized as medium Strikers. The B-45 was the first of the turbines from the 1944 mandate, and it was the second most functional. This basic but capable 4-engine concept was finally chosen by the Air Force and entered service in restricted counts, though mostly in the scouting capacity. Consolidated provided the B-46 as a different four-engine jet striker. Its sleek profile made it one of the most stylish planes of the era, and its utility as an early turbine was fairly decent. However, Consolidated was deeply tied to B-36 assembly, and the medium striker program was not awarded a high importance. The B-48, created by Martin, was a bulky airframe that utilized 6 jet turbines in mid-wing groups. Perhaps the most striking innovation it provided was its tandem landing gear, positioned on the center spine of the plane and braced by 2 stabilizer wheels on each wing. This concept did not interest the Air Force, and similar to the B-46, the test bed was dismantled. Northrop, in an effort to contend in the jet striker sequence, took its earlier piston-powered flying wing and outfitted it with 8 turbojets. The wing was a genius concept that provided superb productivity. It was decades before its era. Likely because it was so radical, it never managed to gain official backing. The technical mastery that Northrop possessed of flying wings yielded results 40 years afterward in the shape of the B-2 stealth striker. Currently, the B-2's profile is a hallmark of high-end flight engineering, yet in 1947, the concept was deemed far too futuristic. Clearly, the most striking entry presented to the Air Force originated from Boeing. Their B-47 Stratojet layout gained from the company's study of German research on swept wing physics. To achieve the peak productivity these wings could offer, they were built incredibly slim and supple. Consequently, their 6 turbines had to be hung on pylons and distributed across every wing. This method made maintaining the motors simpler and also provided airflow advantages for the airframe at velocity. Since the wing was so slim, Boeing utilized the same body-fixed tandem landing gear as Martin's B-48. The B-47 was picked by the Air Force, and essentially hundreds were manufactured during the early 50s. It was, by every metric, a highly effective layout, a perfect example of delivering the correct engineering at the right moment. But it was also a perfect trial space for Boeing to build expertise on the assembly of productive swept-wing jet strikers. One of the issues of early jet turbines was the fairly long duration they needed to attain max thrust, particularly at launch. To balance this, Boeing utilized various types of removable rocket boosters, what became identified as Jet-Assisted Takeoff, or JATO. Following Boeing's iconic piston engine strikers, the victory of the Stratojet mission was to keep Boeing in high favor with the Air Force for decades ahead. The medium striker mission gave Boeing a lead in the fresh effort to create a new, long-range heavy striker to substitute the B-36 Peacemaker, a craft that was obviously at the finish of its utility. In an effort to keep the Peacemaker mission active, Convair built an all-jet swept-wing variant, assigned the model name XB-60. However, the reworking of a plane originally conceived in the Second World War did not move the Air Force. As far back as 1946, Boeing had been tasked to create a successor for the Peacemaker. The firm investigated hundreds of various ideas, spanning from mega-large piston engine planes to those employing envisioned hybrid supercharged power systems, and others with turboprops, jet motors spinning propellers. But nothing offered the massive jump in capability over the B-36 that the Air Force was searching for. When the productivity of the B-47's full swept wing became clear, Boeing suggested another all-jet layout based roughly on its medium striker, but bigger, much bigger. This concept was polished on model 464-67 and was eventually taken by the Air Force as the B-52. A contract for 2 test beds, the X and Y versions, was signed in October 1948, But because of small issues with the X version, the YB-52 was finished first. Now, the YB-52 undergoes trials at Edwards Air Force Base. Its general profile and fighter-style glass was comparable to the B-47, but its scale and capability was much higher. The B-52 also featured many refined systems, like a fully steerable landing gear that rotated to point forward during touchdown, even while the airframe was crabbing to one side. This system was highly classified for many years. Except for the cockpit design, which was swapped to a standard side-by-side transport configuration, there was very little outward contrast between the test beds and the B-52s that entered mass production. Development started in earnest on the B-52A, now called the Stratofortress. Only 3 B-52A variants were constructed, but the B variant, which was matching the 52A, aside from minor refinements, entered full production. Extended endurance was always a central target for the Striker. Mid-air refueling, which was mastered in the late 1940s by Boeing's flying boom technique, had fixed many hurdles. However, in the early years of the B-52 program, mid-air refueling was difficult at best. The early flight tankers were driven by piston motors, with a peak velocity barely above the stalling speed of the jet Strikers. Here, the Y variant manages the precise chore. Jet tanker refueling was clearly superior and safer. It was only with the advent of the KC-135 Stratotanker that flight refueling became mostly safe and routine. One other tactic for boosting endurance was the use of heavy-duty external wing pods, like this version, which can carry 3,000 gallons and can be dropped in a combat scenario. By March 1954, B-52s were exiting Boeing's assembly line in Seattle. The aircraft then entered an integration phase where aviators and airframes were merged into one combat platform. Within this sleek frame, teams of 6 men mastered the ways of the Stratofortress. After the B-36, they found Boeing's Striker much more confined. Every possible inch had been assigned to fuel, ordnance, and avionics. Where the Peacemaker had no fewer than 6 turret spots, the B-52 had just 1. The aircraft banked on its agility and the new field of signal jamming for its self-protection. The Strategic Air Command needed the globe's finest Striker.
B-52 is a great plane because I like flying it. It was a fun plane to fly. One of the most challenging things about it was refueling it. You get a plane that big, 500,000 pounds behind a tanker that's 350,000 pounds, and you got to transfer 120,000 pounds of fuel. That's part of the things that make it a great plane. It can go and go and go. I never got to fly it, but they used to fly 24-hour missions in B-52s, just refuel. So I think what makes a great plane where all the crews that flew it over so many years, My father was too old to fly it. I'm one of the younger people flying it myself, but there are probably 25 years old that are flying it that are planes 10 years older than there.
The Strategic Air Command imposed the same rigorous standards on its personnel as it did on its fresh B-52 Strikers. Team members were coached until they became a premier group of experts, creating a unit matching the advanced new airframes they piloted. For over 10 years, the Stratofortress and its crew held one chief duty: transporting and dropping the thermonuclear hydrogen charge. But if the charge was to be hauled as a warning, it had to be trialed to verify its power. Throughout the 1950s, hydrogen charges were ignited in distant Pacific zones. The final trials, like many before, utilized B-52s to release the lethal cargoes. To these airmen, prepping the most ruinous tool ever imagined by the human brain is a task of accuracy and habit, a technical hauling duty for the highly coached members of the Strategic Air Command unit. Each load has a 100 megaton force, 100 times larger than the charges dropped on Japan. Unlike the munitions of the Second World War, the tool hauled in this weapon bay will be retarded in its fall from the B-52 by a chute, giving the striker more time to leave the zone before the catastrophic blast. Fearing a Soviet nuclear strike, America established a complex range of early sensing stations during the Cold War era. The early warning networks were situated mostly in the frozen north, the most probable path of a first blow. Radar operators constantly watched screens that searched the sky, hunting for the mark that might signal the start of World War III. The Strategic Air Command kept wings of B-52s on combat standby in a steady state of readiness, prepared to serve as the final warning if required. When the red phone signaled, the process was instant. Up to 100 Stratofortresses could be launched in a few brief minutes. The habit was sharply honed by constant drills. The idea of a swift retaliatory blow by SAC was viewed as the country's top shield during the Cold War era. The task of nuclear warning was assigned only to highly vetted officers. All nuclear-capable B-52 captains held at least the rank of major. They carried the heavy duty of directing planes that could alter or even stop life on Earth. But just as turbines replaced piston motors, so the B-52 and its high-altitude Soviet rivals were outclassed by a potent and very lethal new science that was created in Nazi Germany. By the early 1960s, surface-to-air projectiles had been refined by the US and the Soviets to the stage where heavy nuclear strikes by planes would be tough to manage. The focus had turned to a different type of transport: intercontinental ballistic projectiles. Years of progress had created the Polaris and Minuteman projectiles, among other types of rocketry, which meant that crude sorties over hostile airspace were no longer vital to conduct full-scale nuclear war. But SAC's Stratofortresses were kept in rotation. They still had a vital duty to perform in the risky game of nuclear standoff. For the issue with ICBMs was that once fired, they could not be pulled back. This robbed leaders of the long-standing move of muscle flexing and further raised the danger of global struggle. The B-52, utilized in tandem with Hound Dog standoff charges, offered a versatile choice. B-52s could travel to the very limit of hostile airspace, proving America's desire to strike, but still allowing time for final-hour talks. The B-52's utility was further raised by the creation of the Quail Mimic, which baffled hostile radar by duplicating a Stratofortress radio pulse. Further progress after the Hound Dog created the Shram projectile. Tiny and able to be hauled in large accounts, the Shram could be steered from inside the B-52 to marks up to 100 miles off with crushing precision. In 1965, the B-52 was utilized for the first time in Vietnam. Now, it hauled standard charges instead of nuclear weapons, but it stayed a lethal tool. The wing pylons now hauled 24 500-pound gravity bombs. The internal weapon bay brought the full capacity of each aircraft up to a total bomb load of 108. During the span of the Stratofortress's deployment in Southeast Asia, B-52s released more than 3 million tons of ordnance. While the use of the high-altitude strikers was debated at the time, there is little uncertainty that the Stratofortress was quite powerful when utilized for standard bombing. Many experts claim that the heavy strikes on North Vietnam during the linebacker missions forced the rival back to the bargaining table and eventually led to ceasefire. During other Vietnam missions, more advanced munitions were dropped. Some could be triggered later by crews in different planes using thermal imaging gear to sync an ignition with enemy movement. Typical 500 and 750-pound gravity bombs like these were utilized on most B-52 sorties. To permit fast loading and cycling, the internal weapon load was held in preset modules so they could be fitted in the briefest possible span. Teams originally stationed at Guam prepare for the long 8-hour sortie to their far-off mark. The team in the flight deck and the isolated tail gunner take their spots as each plane readies for departure.
Well, the primary role of the B-52 in Vietnam was basically tactical bombing of enemy troop concentrations. But it really started out, we used to cut roads early in '67. We did a lot of missions. We were interdicting trucks and supplies, but primarily we were cutting roads to back them up so the tactical forces could make the strikes. Later around Khe Sanh, we were really breaking up enemy troop formations. And we got very, very successful as they had to concentrate their forces. We became more successful at what the role of the B-52 could really bring to bear, which is massive air power.
Our defense posture provides the umbrella under which all competition flourishes in this capitalistic society. So the B-52, because of its tremendous design, lasted a great long time. And because of the philosophy and sometimes the tendency to forget history, which we seem to do in this country, it's lasted a long time as well. It's had to.
During the long years of the Vietnam War, nose graphics were painted on more than a few B-52s. Though the graphics were milder than their Second World War counterparts, the sorties flown were no less risky. B-52 teams had to face fast and nimble enemy MiGs, anti-aircraft fire, and worst of all, lethal surface-to-air missiles. Despite it all, they had duties to complete, and like all troops, they flew regardless of resistance. After a sortie, ground teams quickly fixed the shrapnel-torn frames of returned Stratofortresses, prepping them for the next duty. Occasionally, the impacts were dangerously near. Despite the low fuel departure rule, the massive weight of the weapon load placed extreme strain on the turbines, which constantly required servicing and frequently replacement. MiGs were held away and sometimes downed by tail gunners who, in their isolated spots, used a radar-targeted, remote-operated bank of 4 cannons with crushing firepower. The tail gunner's spot was removed with the debut of the B-52G and H variants. All B-52G and H variants are fitted with EVS, electro-optical viewing systems. This permits the pilot and other team members to observe what is before the plane, even in blackness and mist, via thermal digital cameras and a screen. This upgrade arrived just in time, as the duty of the B-52 has shifted to that of a low-altitude tactical striker. Current Stratofortresses might have to fly obscured through nuclear clouds. With the B-52 protected by radiation-shielded blinds, the EVS is the team's sole visual link to the outer world. But though the duty has evolved, alert phones and pulsing lights are still the reality of SAC. When the alarm sounds in drill or in combat, SAC's massive warning force moves into play. The initial move a general in charge of maneuvers will make is leaving his land center for the security and mobility of a flying command station. At the exact moment the signal is triggered, flight teams dash to their airframes, which are constantly on standby for immediate launch. The general is aloft, and the B-52s are close behind. It is only in the security of the sky that SAC's warning force can withstand a strike and simultaneously be on their path to provide a reply. The high-velocity departure is a necessity for endurance. In this drill, the possibility of an atomic flash is accounted for, and the radiation protection blinds are slid into spot. Now, the team is entirely reliant on the EVS and other digital aids, for they cannot risk glancing out of the flight deck. Flying low across the terrain, every pilot expects his commands. This time, the B-52s are pulled back, but all involved realize that they possess the potential to enter hostile space if needed. The drill is finished, and the general is satisfied. After roughly 40 years of duty, the B-52 still executes its task well, though the craft is frequently viewed as nearing the finish of its flight life.
We went over their arc light, which was 6 months at a time, and I did it 5 or 6 times, I don't remember. But the thing was, is you live with these people, you live with them, you sleep with them, you eat with them. They become brothers, so you trust them with your lives. You literally did, because if an EWO said brake right or brake left, you didn't ask why, you just did it. That means turn a plane left or right because there was a threat coming in. You just did it. You knew that whatever he was telling you, he was in the plane with you. And vice versa. You never second guess the other guy because they were the expert in their position. And that's what the teamwork was. You learn to respect the other guy's position and how well they served him in position. The B-52 is getting old. It does need a follow-on bomber. And I think the B-1 is probably that type of an aircraft. Next question evolves is, do we need the B-2s? I don't know. It's awful expensive aircraft.
Almost as soon as the first B-52 exited the production line, the Strategic Air Command was looking for a successor. First arrived the ill-fated XB-70, an advanced concept that was deemed obsolete by surface-to-air missile science. More recently, there was the swing-wing B-1 Striker, built by Rockwell International. The B-1 offered a mix of high velocity and height, with the wings swept back, and more efficient low-altitude flight with the wings forward. However, the price of fielding large counts of B-1s was not approved by the Carter leadership, and the mission was paused throughout the 70s. In the 1980s, the updated B-1B entered production, not in the high-altitude duty, but as a low-level striker. Roughly 100 B-1Bs have been fielded by the Strategic Air Command. The craft is pricey, but if the B-1B matches the total utility and value for capital that its ancestor, the B-52, so clearly reached, it's capital well spent. After 7 decades of duty, through a phase of incredible technical breakthroughs, the B-52 is still a tool of massive strength and utility. It will be a very tough act to follow.
The story of our nation's air defense has of necessity been a story of rapid changes. Changes in concepts, strategies, and weapon systems brought about by the ever-increasing demands of the time. And though the skies of the future may belong to the age of rockets and missiles, the silhouette of the long-range missile bomber still dominates. The following is a profile of the B-52, and an account of the events of the past year which developed the most powerful bomber ever to patrol the air, the B-52H. 4 events of 1960 best illustrate the stages of development and progress of the latest version of the missile bomber. During the latter part of March, the first developmental engineering inspection was held at Boeing's Wichita division to evaluate the innovations to the B-52 which brought about a model change. The new turbofan engines were such a significant change that the engine pod was the subject of a separate DEI a few months earlier. Major interest centered around the airplane mock-up, which displayed such items as the ASG-21 fire control system, the new ECM systems, including a modified shaft dispenser, the numerous changes associated with improved low-level capability, such as the single-motion seat ejection and the bomb navigation system, which incorporates terrain avoidance radar. Air Force acceptance of the planned configuration for the H model during this DEI paved the way for its continued development without delay. The second major phase of development occurred with the delivery of the first 47 body section in August. The H began to take form. With experience accumulated over years of building Stratofortresses, the complexity of this airplane presented few problems. Joining of the wings and major sections was accomplished on schedule. The last assembly stage before moving to the camouflage hangar was the change installation where all current ECPs were installed. The rollout of the first H marked the completion of the assembly stage as it was readied for a key pre-delivery inspection. The fourth and last developmental phase was represented by 2 significant inspections. The contractor's demonstration inspection, held the latter part of November, followed by the contractor's technical compliance inspection. The ground support equipment required for maintenance and overhauling the new systems was demonstrated at the CDI. The majority of the items displayed and demonstrated were applicable to the new model, but some of the items procured for support of earlier models were also included. Immediately following the CDI was the CTCI, which brought more than 170 Air Force personnel to the Wichita Division for a key pre-delivery inspection of the first H model. This was the first opportunity for the Air Force to conduct a thorough scrutiny of all changes included in the first B-52H airplane. Because of the thoroughness of previous DEIs and close coordination during the design of the changes, no major changes were requested. In addition, only a small number of minor changes were necessary to meet Air Force requirements. Behind the relatively short span of a few days of thorough inspection lay many months of experimentation, exploration, and research. The major components which provided a significantly improved airplane over all previous models of the B-52 represent the latest advancement that technology has developed. A major contribution to the superior performance of the new model is the Pratt & Whitney turbofan engines that enable the missile bomber to fly farther than ever before without refueling because of lower specific fuel consumption. The added thrust of the turbofan engine allows system simplification by elimination of the water injection system. Valuable information concerning performance and all pertinent data on the operation of the engine system was collected on a ground test stand and evaluated before the prototype airplane was flown. The G-test bed airplane with the turbofan engines has flown over 100 hours during 1960, with tests being conducted at altitudes up to 60,000 feet. The flight testing explored critical flight conditions, obtained extensive performance data, checked out engine systems, and provided confidence in the B-52H production design. Performance runs with the turbofan engines have shown average specific range improvements over the B-52G of 19.2% for high-altitude cruise conditions. As a missile platform bomber, The latest model of the B-52 has the capabilities of launching 3 different types of missiles, each designed for a separate purpose. All B-52H airplanes are scheduled to be delivered with complete provisions for carrying and launching 4 GAM-72A Quail decoy missiles. The range of the missile is 340 nautical miles at high altitude. Its mission to confuse, dilute, saturate, or otherwise degrade the enemy's radar and IR-controlled air defense systems. This both improves the destructive potential and reduces the cost of strategic bombing missions. Minor modifications to all B-52s previous to the H model were necessary for carrying the Quail. The internal changes were easily made without cost to the plane's performance or its ability to carry other strategic stores. The developmental program of the GAM-77 Hound Dog missile will be completed by mid-1961. The air-to-surface missile has a maximum range of 634 nautical miles and can deliver a nuclear warhead by penetrating at high or low altitude. An advanced version of the Hound Dog, the GAM-77A, is being developed by North American. This missile will have an increased range capability of up to 700 nautical miles and will be equipped with a cartridge starter, making it compatible with the quick alert concept of the B-52H. The third member of the B-52's missile arsenal is the GAM-87A Skybolt ballistic missile, currently under development by Douglas Aircraft Company. The Skybolt Provisions DEI was held at Wichita in June, when the mating of the missile to the B-52G wing was accomplished. The missile DEI was held at Culver City, California in August. The final Provisions DEI to be held at Wichita in January of 1961. GAM-87A provisions will be installed prior to the time the missile and its associated equipment become available. The maximum range capability of the ballistic missile is 1,050 nautical miles, and it can deliver a nuclear warhead on enemy targets from either high or low altitudes. When the Douglas missile reaches operational status, the Stratofortress Skybolt combination will unite the human judgment of a manned bomber with the hypersonic speed of a ballistic weapon, representing the ultimate in weapon system capability. The AN/ASG-21 fire control system is one of the major changes to the airplane configuration, which markedly improves the B-52's defense capability. The major obvious differences between the old and new systems are the tail configuration, dual search track radar, and the new 20-millimeter Gatling gun. Well in advance of actual firing, the entire ASG-21 system underwent a thorough laboratory checkout with the aid of a complete mock-up. The dual search track radar, shown under testing conditions, operates in the KU frequency band, which minimizes interference from lower frequency X-band ECM. Static firing of the Gatling gun was accomplished near the end of the year. Close-up high-speed photography reveals the Gatling gun principle, which discharges at the rate of 4,000 rounds per minute. To date, all ground firing activities have successfully been completed. The Fire Control System Flight Test Program is currently being conducted on a prototype airplane. Approximately 60 hours of flight time with numerous fighter passes have been completed, and the results indicate that the system target detection and acquisition will meet specification requirements. Since early B-47 production, ever-increasing requirements for electrical power have presented a design and supply problem for both the Air Force and Boeing. B-52H design studies pointed out the desirability of providing electrical power supplies which would accommodate revised and improved electronic systems and components. In addition, electrical power supply and drive design changes were necessitated by cowling redevelopment of fan engines on the B-52H. The B-52H is equipped with a 120 kVA electrical power system. Power is furnished by 4 120 kVA brushless generators. The constant speed drive, which will be delivered on early B-52H airplanes, will be rated at 60 kVA. pending completion of qualification tests. Development and testing of the constant speed drive is continuing. When completed, internal changes will be made in the drive, upgrading it to 120 kVA capability. Throughout the year, several structural programs have been conducted designed to assure the structural integrity and extend the life of the B-52. One such program, the B-52G cyclic test, not yet completed, is helping to determine the fatigue-sensitive areas of the airplane structure. This is particularly significant in view of new strategic operational concepts for the B-52, such as low-level penetration. The test also provides information for establishing structural inspections and required modifications to extend the structural life of the airplane. During the past 12 months, the airplane was cyclic tested to a repeated load spectrum representative of over 200 simulated SAC missions. The test revealed some critical areas which have resulted in changes both for B-52H production and modification kits for existing B-52G models. Timely kit installation will improve the structural life of the critical areas as well as prevent premature structural failures on the SAC fleet. Results of the cyclic test have proved invaluable, both from the standpoint of locating critical fatigue areas and for calculating structural airplane life under varied planned usage. Major design changes in the airplane meant extensive flight testing for structural integrity, flight load surveys, and flutter. Among major structural integrity flight tests were those which measured airplane capabilities with and without the GAM-77 attached. Flutter tests proved, as predicted by wind tunnel findings, that the airplane was safe from flutter throughout its weight and speed range. Modification of the airplane escape system was evaluated under several flight conditions. Findings indicated that crew members have been given a greater margin of safety than ever before. This is especially true under low-level conditions. Several seat firings were conducted during the year at the Edwards Air Force Base range. An anthropometric dummy, clothed and equipped similar to a regular crew member, was ejected at altitudes of approximately 800 and 14,000 feet. During preliminary testing, changes were made to provide maximum reliability of all ejection seat components. Early in the year, an altitude record for the B-52 was set when the H prototype airplane, powered by the turbofan engines, exceeded 60,000 feet at a gross weight of 188,000 pounds. Though known for its superior performance at altitudes above 50,000 feet, the B-52 also underwent extensive testing to investigate its low-level capabilities. To meet a demonstration requirement, both a G and a D model of the missile bomber successfully flew a VFR low-level mission profile on 2 separate occasions. The course, originating from Wink, Texas, extended through 6 states, over 1,019 miles, ending in Chadron, Nebraska. The mission profiles were flown at an average altitude of 500 feet and at speeds which averaged over 400 knots for the entire flight. Further flight testing of the terrain avoidance radar was accomplished throughout the year. During this program, low-level flying has been demonstrated under instrument flight conditions, solely with reference to the terrain avoidance radar and normal flight instruments. One flight was made under these conditions for a distance of 1,000 nautical miles at an average altitude above the terrain of 750 feet and at an average airspeed of 300 knots. Tied directly to low-altitude flight tests is the operation of a Boeing-designed and built low-level flight simulator. The simulator has provided invaluable data, particularly in connection with the implementation of the terrain avoidance radar used in low-level flights. Simulated flights have enabled human factors engineers to evaluate suitability of instrumentation arrangement and determine how well the pilot performs with terrain avoidance radar while flying under simulated low-altitude conditions. Continued peak performance of the B-52 would not be possible were it not for the success of its major support groups and activities. With the addition of 2 on-site locations, one at Biggs Air Force Base, the other at Barksdale Air Force Base, modification and maintenance activity was expanded to 11 sky-speed bases. Provisions for both the GAM-72 and the GAM-77 were installed at depot level and sky-speed bases in a two-pronged effort to improve the missile-carrying potential of the SAC fleet as quickly as possible. The sky-speed program has continued to prove its merit as the best means of swiftly updating all models of the B-52 as each new improvement is developed. In addition to the sustained sky-speed efforts to update the fleet, Project Turnkey was initiated at Wichita to handle the largest major revision of any B-52 model. The in-plant modification program accompanies a similar effort being conducted at both Sama and Okama. 66 E-model airplanes will be modified at Wichita to increase their capacity for low-level penetration and carrying of the GAM-72 and GAM-77 missiles. As in all airplane model changes, numerous items of ground support equipment are required for maintenance and modification activity. For example, this QEC test stand was developed for testing of replacement turbofan engines. The new stand permits thorough testing and calibration of an engine, complete with accessories, before it is installed on the airplane. Previous test stands did not allow testing of engines in a complete QEC configuration. The QEC test stand would allow SAC crews to have a supply of fully tested engines on hand at all times and eliminates using airplanes for engine test beds. Should trouble develop in an engine, it could be replaced with an engine already checked out for flight. Manufacturing continued its progress in the vital area of research and development of new processes. Among the most significant was the development of the shear, or the flow turning process. It further extends manufacturing capabilities for the forming of one-piece unwelded parts, difficult shapes, such as cones, tubes, and spheres. The use of this process provides consistent production of close tolerance parts at reduced part cost. The die forming of radomes was another process developed to solve a specific manufacturing problem. The problem in this case was to find a mechanical method of producing void-free, high-temperature radomes. The absence of voids in radomes not only helps deter delamination of the layers, but also means that the part's electrical properties are improved. Die forming of this part has meant an extension of previous design limitations, enabling the production of previously difficult shapes with a significant reduction of man-hours. Before the development of the process which produced this spiral antenna, existent manufacturing techniques were unable to approach the theoretical electrical properties of such a design. Tape-controlled milling produced the part from a theoretical equation, thereby eliminating the need for dimensioning. Another support activity of the new H model included the Air Force Factory Special Training Program. Over 425 Air Force personnel this year have undergone extensive electronics and mechanical systems maintenance training at the Wichita Division. In addition to the normal in-plant training of company personnel, instructors were called upon for the first time to conduct and supervise training in the field. Training sessions to handle the rework of the B-52 fuel quantity system and installation of wing kits were conducted on-site at all sky-speed bases by Wichita instructors whose specialized knowledge made immediate training available. The history of events and activities of the B-52 in the year 1960 gives strong evidence that the manned, long-range missile bomber, more than ever before, has a vital role in the Air Force concept of military strategy. It is a proved operational weapon capable of weathering an attack and retaliating selectively and decisively against any enemy.
Now, during this report period, a major objective of all previous effort has been achieved through the completion of the first phase of flight testing of ship number 1. Looking back to early July, the testing of its various electrical and hydraulic systems had just been completed, and the XB-70A was moved out of the hangar to the engine run-up area for its final pre-flight checkouts. First on the agenda was fuel system calibration. Cockpit fuel quantity gauges were checked as known amounts of fuel were pumped into each tank. At this time, the airplane's fuel transfer and fuel distribution systems were also checked out. Installation of the flight test instrumentation package was completed. In flight, its 3 tape recorders gather information on the pilot's control positions, control surface movements, and temperatures and hydraulic pressures throughout the airplane. And for the first time, the engines were operated in the airplane. Through single and multiple engine runs, pre-flight crews checked engine performance, thrust control systems, instrumentation, and secondary power systems. The flight controls, previously checked out in the hangar, now perform perfectly on air vehicle hydraulic power. All efforts were then directed toward preparing the plane for taxi tests. The first taxi run was started on 9 August. At the controls were the men who would take command on the initial flights. The pilot, Al White, Chief Test Pilot for North American Aviation, and the co-pilot, Colonel Joe Cotton of the United States Air Force. Some problems were encountered in the hydraulic system and required minor modifications of hydraulic pumps and associated plumbing. The fourth in the series of taxi tests, conducted on 25 August, was a complete success. An initial run was made to 87 knots to check nose wheel steering, brakes, and ground handling characteristics. The high-speed run. It reached a speed of 122 knots. Further checks were made on nose wheel steering and ground handling. The drag chutes were deployed at 122 knots, and moderate braking was applied. Chutes were jettisoned at 80 knots. The plane was stopped with ease through moderate braking. 2 more taxi runs were made, followed by countless checks and rechecks of the various systems and instruments. The XB-70A was ready for the big day, September 21st, 1964. White and Cotton were at the controls. Their mission? Take off from Palmdale, follow a scheduled flight plan, and land at Edwards Air Force Base.
5, 4, 3, 2, brake release now.
At 8:38 in the morning, the wheels started rolling. Acceleration was rapid and liftoff occurred under 5,000 feet. With all engines at military power, the climb continued steadily while all systems were checked and controls tried out. With all systems in the green, the gear handle was moved to the up position. The main landing gear has a 3-stage retraction cycle. First the bogies fold, then the struts rotate, finally retract aft. The gear started into the rotation cycle, then it stopped.
Gear has rotated and stopped, is not folding. Okay, they are static, is that right? They're not moving? That's correct.
The gear handle was placed down. The landing gear returned to its normal extended position and locked in place. The flight proceeded in accordance with an alternate plan to gather low-speed handling and stability information. Because of an indication of overspeed, one engine was shut down. The flight continued unhampered. After an hour of flight in the vicinity of Edwards Air Force Base, a low-altitude pass was made over the runway, then the final approach.
We're going to land out of this one. Okay. Chase, if you obviously see me leveling off a little high, well, let me know, huh? No problem. I'll give you a countdown from about 50 feet. Okay. 50 feet. 30. 20. 12. 5. And you're on. duty.
Got high in the left gear.
Left gear's on 5.
The pilots landed unaware that a brake was locked. The 2 rear tires blew out and started burning. But there was no difficulty in controlling direction, and the plane was brought to a perfect straight line stop.
Very good, Jettison. 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 Jettison left, 74.
This is all your aft tires are blowing and they're both burning, but not very badly. You've got 3 fire trucks with you.
Fire crews closed in and extinguished the blaze in the wheel area. While the first flight did not proceed exactly to plan, it did prove the takeoff and landing characteristics and showed low-speed handling qualities to be quite favorable. Total flight time was 1 hour and 7 minutes. The brake problem was solved, a faulty switch in the landing gear system was replaced, and the engine overspeed condition was corrected. On the 5th of October, the plane was ready for its second flight. The plan was to collect data at subsonic speeds, then move gradually up toward a speed of Mach 1. After the main landing gear refused to retract on the first flight, attention was concentrated on the underside, the landing gear area.
Here we go with the gear on the count. 3, 2, 1, gear up. Handle up. Doors are opening. 3 green lights are out. Looks good. Nose gear is up and door locked. We're going to wheel well. And both main gear doors are coming closed, and they're closed, and it looks clean now.
They came up in a perfect retraction cycle, and the doors closed. Gear retraction completed successfully. White and Cotton took the plane up to 16,000 feet for the first series of tests. Wing flutter and stability checks were made between Mach 0.52 and 0.68. Flight remained in the Edwards Air Force Base area. Another climb was set for 35,000 feet. During this climb, at an altitude of 28,000 feet, a caution light indicated a pressure loss in one of the 2 utility hydraulic systems. As a precautionary measure, the landing gear was lowered, and following standard safety procedures, the decision was made to land on the 11-mile-long runway of Rogers Dry Lake. Touchdown was smooth, rollout perfect, and the brakes operated normally.
Every aircraft has a story that deserves to be told. Don't let these legends fade into the past. Like this video and subscribe to our channel and help us keep aviation history alive.
The city of Spokane, first B-52 to be assigned to the 92nd Bomb Wing at Fairchild Air Force Base. Since it began flying missions in 1957, the ground and flight crews of this Stratofortress have built a record that stands as a mark to be bettered by any other single plane in the Air Force. Thanks primarily to first-rate maintenance on the part of ground crewmen and precision teamwork by the flight crew, This B-52 has flown 50 straight missions with no late takeoffs, no aborts, no cancellations. Chalk this up as a record to be beaten. Congratulations to the men who maintain and fly the city of Spokane.